over time. I'd like to introduce to you all Fiona Costello. She's going to take the presentation on from here. I hope you all enjoy.
Good evening, everybody. As Jill said, my name's Fiona Costello and I work for the Western Australia Council of Social Services. I usually deliver these workshops or talks to community service organisations, but Jill is very persuasive and she's a champion in the space of keeping children safe. So I really wanted to give her help her out with this. So before we start, I will keep it maybe a little bit informal, given that there is only a few of us, but I would like to just start off by acknowledging that I am hosting this talk from the country of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I just want to acknowledge all the traditional owners where you're volunteering or working from today, and any First Nations people that might be present in the workshop, and pay my respects to elders both past and present. And I would also like to acknowledge the victims survivors of the Royal Commission of Child Sexual Abuse, because of them today. Because they came together to show, to advocate and show their courage and resilience, we have all this content to help keep children safe from harm. Can everybody see my slides? Are you able to? Yep. So although I'm not going to be talking or showing any graphic images, there might be some, the talk could elicit some feelings, and some words that we say could actually trigger somebody who may have some past trauma. So I just want you to take care today when we actually are going through this talk. And feel free at the end to ask any questions in regards to the content that I actually am talking about. And if there is something that you can take away and maybe talk to, whether it's statistics that I go through or even just anything from the talk that you can go home and talk to your family and your friends about, because that's how we actually start breaking down the stigma in relation to child maltreatment or child harm. So today I'm going to be talking about children or a child. And when I talk about a child, I am talking about anybody under the age of 18. The UN Convention of the Rights of the Child does actually define a young person as a person under the age of 18. And what we do know when we actually are in our clubs or in our community, that children actually are drawn to attachment. They're drawn to environments that are actually, they feel they can build a relationship with somebody. And that leaves them at times in quite a vulnerable situation. If there's somebody in the clubs or in our community or in our organization that does have a propensity to offend against a child. And if a child is abused against, it doesn't just impact the child, it impacts the whole family, impacts the schools, impacts communities. It just impacts generations to come. So it is important to actually know some statistics and why it is important to actually keep children safe. And so today I just want to go across some of the prevalence of abuse here in Australia, because there is this also myth that child sexual abuse is historical. But the study that I am actually going to talk to will actually show that it's actually quite prevalent today. So last year, the Australian Child Maltreatment Study was released in April of 2023. And it had identified for the first time Australians across a population who had experienced either one or all 5 types of abuses, from physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, and family and violence. I do have to apologise. My dog is here beside me, keeping me company. So what the treatment, or what the study was doing, was actually looking at the health risk behaviours of somebody who had actually experienced abuse, to just understand what their health outcomes were throughout life. And so they randomly selected 8,500 people aged between 16 and 65. And out of that cohort, they ensured that they had a group that were 16 to 24. And I'm going to speak to just as the stats that are actually on my screen, which were from the 16 to 65-year-olds, but the 16 to 24-year-old is just as alarming as the stats from the 16 to 65-year-olds. And so if we look at the stats here, for physical abuse, out of that cohort, 32% had said that they had experienced physical abuse. 28.5 had experienced sexual abuse. Emotional abuse was 30.9, 8.9 was neglect, and 39.6 was family and domestic violence. From the younger age group, in regards to family and domestic violence, it was 43.8%. And in regards to sexual abuse, that was 25.3%. And so those statistics, when we think about it, are pretty actually alarming. So that's like 1/3 of the population in Australia will have either experienced or will experience sexual abuse. That's 1 in 3 girls or 1 in 7 boys. And so looking at those statistics, they then looked at somebody who had experienced abuse and what were the mental health, or what were the health risk behaviours or disorders. And they found that people who had been abused, whether it was one or all of these abuses, had also either depression, anxiety, drug and alcohol abuse, or PTSD, or all 4 of those abuses, which then led to binge eating, self-harming, cannabis use, suicidal thoughts, and high risks of suicide. And they found that people who actually had experienced those abuses as well were also at higher risk of using those health services. And so when we think of those people and the trauma they've actually endured, it really just shines a light that we all have a duty to protect children from harm. And it is a responsibility of all of us from the whole community. Whether you're in an organisation, whether you're working in a sports club or volunteering in a sports club, whether you're in a shop, wherever you are, it's all of our responsibility to keep children safe. And this is where I'm talking about earlier when I was saying about if there is some statistic that actually you find that is quite either alarming or, wowsy, it's about having those conversations with people so people are aware that there is still a risk there for young people. Which takes us on to now where the Royal Commission into institution responses to child sexual abuse. And that actually showed a lot of systemic failures, not just in government institutions, but religious institutions, but it was in every single institution throughout Australia, from sporting to justice system to out-of-home care to you name it, every institution was impacted. It wasn't just the religious institutions. And so where did it actually come from? So back in 2013, Julia Gillard, or 2012, Julia Gillard came under extreme pressure. And it was from those religious institutions because there was a prevalence of abuse that was occurring. And so she agreed to this Royal Commission, which was established in 2013. And the final report was handed down in 2017. And from the Commission, they made 409 recommendations how to improve child safety in institutions. That also includes in your sporting clubs, in your whether it's culture, whether it's cultural groups, wherever there's children involved, we have a responsibility to keep children safe. And here in WA, they're tasked with implementing 310 of those recommendations over a 10-year period. And so when they actually had the inquiry into the Royal Commission, they found that there was so many systemic failures, poor professional practices, where there was like inadequate training for volunteers, for staff, and how to actually identify, recognize abuse, put safeguards and measures in place. There was weak governance structures, one that didn't prioritize children, really lacked accountability and oversight, and just let abuse go undetected or just unaddressed. Then there was failures to record. So if there was somebody had actually came and actually reported abuse, there was a neglect of actually recording the documenting the abuse and reporting that on to the relevant authorities. There was just a really misunderstanding of the seriousness of the abuse, and basically organizations were actually prioritizing the reputation of their clubs and of their organizations over believing the children. And so out of the Royal Commission came about the 10 national principles. And so when I go through this talk today, all the sources or materials that I will be using will be from the Australian Human Rights Commission, the WA Commissioner for Children and Young People, and also the SNAIC, which is the peak Aboriginal body for children. So what is a child safe organisation? And this is where it gets confusing for a lot of people, because there's a misunderstanding what is child protection and what is a child safe organisation. And a child safe organisation is one that actually looks, whether it's your club or whatever it is, the institution that children are involved, looking at it and seeing how you can actually prevent abuse from occurring. So it's about putting the best interest of the child at the forefront of everything that you actually do. And it's about responding to actual abuse. So we've just even read of what's on the screen here. Child safe organisation is one that puts the best interest of the child or young person first, and consciously and systematically. And it is about creating those environments where even in your organization's values, in your actions, your thoughts, how you actually operate in your club should always have the best interest of the child at the forefront. You want to hear from children as well. You want to engage children, because what we might see as, okay, I'm going to go out there and look at try and mitigate risks in the environment, whether it's in a football pitch, whether it's in a change room, etc. We might actually look at the physical risks, but we need to actually consult with children, because there's a difference between actually feeling safe or being safe and then feeling safe, the physical feeling of being safe and the psychological feeling of being safe. And it's important to actually, what we might actually not even consider as a risk, it may be a risk for children. And an organisation is one that reduces the likelihood of harm to children and young people, but also increases the likelihood of identifying any harm, or if there's somebody who has that propensity to offend, that you're actually more aware of what that actually looks like, what is grooming behaviour, and what, if there's a change in a young person's behaviour, is that something that you need to actually look further into? And then how you actually respond to any concerns or allegations or suspicions of harm. And I'm not going to go into each and every one of the national principle, because the way they have been designed is actually being done in regards to the size and the capacity of your organisation. And so that's going to be completely different for a grassroots organisation than what it is going to be for a big institution that may have 200-300 employees. But the most important thing that we need to look at today is actually, each of them have overlap and are interrelated. But if we look at this our screen here, the child safety and well-being is embedded in organizations' leadership, governance, and culture. Whoever is on your board or actually has a responsibility at that higher level of your club needs to be aware of some of those safeguarding measures, and what we need to actually do in order to keep children safe. So it goes into children's participation and empowerment, families and communities involvement, equity and diverse needs, human resources, which may not apply to you, but it is important that, depending on your organization, that and whether it is applicable, that people who are volunteering have a working with children's check. And that is also different in regards to whether they are a parent, etc. But there's different rules that will apply. And that children actually know if there is a concern, if there's a concern that they feel uncomfortable around a coach or a volunteer, how they actually put in a complaint or who they actually go to. And so that's why it's important to always have in the forefront through the culture of your club, the children are aware that they actually can come and actually put in a complaint or actually speak to someone, and who is that person and how you actually notify them of what that process actually looks like. Then looking at the physical and online environment, how you actually can identify the risks. What are the risk factor? How much contact do children have with your club or your organization, and how do we actually mitigate that risk then? And that continuous improvement, if something isn't working, that we actually go back, review it, and actually ensure that, or if there is a situation where there has been a complaint or an allegation about someone, how you've actually responded to that complaint and what actions you have put in to improve it for future, in case there is future disclosures. And also having then looking at what the child safe policies and procedures are. So, as I said, I've just gone through just a few little bits and pieces that we can actually talk to how you can actually get started in your organization. And on the WA Commissioner for Children and Young People's page, there is a self-assessment tool. And as I said before, depending on the size of your club or your organization, you would adapt that assessment tool to your capacity. So, one thing is it states in it that you must have a child safety and wellbeing policy. Now, if you're a grassroots organization, that wouldn't apply to you, but it is important then that you would have that public commitment to child safety. And that is developing that with your board, with staff, with volunteers and members of your club, including children, and ensuring that every child, no matter what their background is, feels accepted and belongs to your community, but also your club. And some ways that you can actually, it's about your way, how you are going to tell the community or tell children and young people and families how you are going to prioritize children's safety. And some ways you can actually advertise your commitment is actually promoting this on your website, if you've got a website, through social media platforms, newsletters, posters. If you're actually doing a volunteering advertisement, if you're onboarding some volunteers and you want to ensure that they're actually safe to work with children, just ensuring that you're quite clear what is the expectations from your club about working with children. What is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and what will occur, what will the consequences be if they actually breach that. And so that actually can be included as well when you're within your commitment of child safety as well, or the both of them can be interlinked. And it's also really just shows children as well, and families and the community, that you do actually value children. You want to hear their concerns. You want to actually try and improve your club. for their actual safety and well-being. And it'll also just help, attract new members, but retain existing members as well. It's about as well is just ensuring children that no matter what, if they come to you, you're going to believe them and you're going to do everything in your power to actually mitigate any risks to them. Then we're looking at building a safe culture. And that really is about the organisation. It kind of links into that commitment to child safety. You want to continuously, in your behaviours, in your attitudes, how you talk about children, how you speak to children, you want to actually role model that you're actually going to continue to keep children safe, that you want to improve their well-being, you want to do everything to try and ensure that they're safe from any harm. And you want to encourage that feedback from parents as well, the wider community. It's just about being transparent as possible, being open, whether you hold an open night or an AGM, the first thing is that, your commitment to child safety, even something about a little note of what you've done this year in order to keep children safe, whether there has been any concerns, how you've actually enacted on that. It's about having those codes of conduct, getting the feedback from or input from all club members on whether it's volunteers, parents and children. What is, as I said before, what is acceptable, unacceptable behaviour. You don't want to be alone one-on-one with a child. As an adult, that is unacceptable behaviour. So it's about looking at both in the physical and online, how you can actually, what the risks are there and how you can actually mitigate them, and putting it down on paper. This is what our code of conduct is in keeping children actually safe. Then you want to look at developing some of those risk management strategies. And this may not be applicable to your organizations, but as a whole, we all have some areas where we're going to be working with children. We will be able to identify some areas of risks. And so how we actually then address those risks. We want to encourage coaches, referees, volunteers, whoever, if they see something that isn't right, or if they see something that they think is inappropriate behaviour, that they're able to go to the board members or they're able to go to the head of the club and actually have those conversations. And you have something in place that if somebody has a concern, how you're actually going to act on that concern. Is it a serious breach? Is it a misconduct, or is it a criminal offence that they're actually engaging in? And that can be overwhelming, I know, when you're just a volunteer in an organisation, but there is actually organisations out there that you can actually ring up if you're unsure, or else even going to having those conversations with the board or the head of the club and saying, hey, what do we do in this situation? And then either reaching out to the Department of Communities, or else the Department of Local Government also has a child safeguarding unit that you could ring up and ask them for advice, the WA Police. So if you've got any concerns, the best thing to do is go with your gut and actually act on it. That would be my advice. But if there is any concerns in regards to children's safety and children being subjected to any harm, always ensure you document that harm. Keep a record of what occurred, the dates, the times, etc., and what actions you actually took, and ensuring that it actually does meet legislation. So what I mean by that is, if it is a criminal offence, that you actually document that and you actually follow, you contact the WA Police, which takes me on to, if you do have any concerns about children, ring up 000. You don't know who to call and you feel like somebody has done something to a child, or you've got concerns about a child's safety, whether that's within your club or out externally, whether it's a situation at home, ring up the 000, or else ring up 13 14 44 and just get some advice. Otherwise, you could ring up the Department of Communities. There's a number here. They've got a child and safety and wellbeing unit, and they'll actually be able to advise you whether or not your concerns are actually valid and what steps you can actually take next. Because we don't want a situation where, you see something, you're really feeling uncomfortable, in yourself, but you just don't know what to do about it. So you do nothing, because if it came out that something did occur, living with that will be actually, you don't want to live with that situation where you could have prevented harm from actually occurring. And so these are some of the useful resources. So on the Department of Communities, they have, if you key in Department of Communities Knowledge Hub, that gives you all the resources for all of the 10 national principles, how you can actually implement. And I think I've given you, Jill, haven't I, a handout of resources that you can actually circulate under each of the national principles. So we'll actually circulate that around afterwards, but also you've got the Child Safeguarding under Sports West. You've got the National Office of Child Safety. The Human Rights Commissioner has e-learning modules that are free, that you can actually go online. And it is good that whoever is responsible for your club or your organisation is aware of what the 10 national principles are and what you would need to do within your organisation. I have put down here the Ombuds WA Reportable Conduct Scheme, but I actually don't think that's applicable to you within that club setting, sports and club setting. And that is just a brief chat from me, which is probably a lot to actually talk about or to actually go through. So I'm happy if anybody has any questions, because it is just broad. It's been skimmed across, but if you have any questions, please ask and I will try and answer them the best I can.
Jill, I'll start. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Rod.
Hi, Rod.
You mentioned when we were having a chat this afternoon about someone within the organisation taking up a role of being child safe, but of course we want everyone to understand what the child safe is about within the organisation. But coming back to someone within the organisation, I think that's a good idea too. How would you suggest that might occur? And I was talking to Jill here, but Fiona might understand too.
Look, Rod, in all honesty, as a club development officer, every single sporting club should have what they call a member protection officer at least. It's not an onerous job. It's just somebody that the rest of the committee, all of the members know that there's an issue across the board. That's where they go. At the minute, cricket are probably leading the forefront as the best with the best child safeguarding policies of all the sports. And every cricket club must have a member protection officer that covers the child, as also a child protection member officer. And that's honestly the best way to go about it. All you really need to be looking for is obviously someone that, cares enough to be able to resolve disputes as well as look out for any issues that clubs might be having. So you need someone who's not probably a hothead.
Yeah,
Even just like Rod, even like when I talk about this, the child safe commitment statement, that's also a deterrent within an organization or within a club as well. It's, so far, or in the last decade, people have been relying so much on working with children's checks. And working with children's checks are only effective from the time they're actually assessed. And they're looking at past offences. And so now we need to start looking at ways of how we could actually put preventative measures in place. And so what you're saying by basically having that child safe commitment statement is to somebody who may think that your organisation or your club or something is a weak club, and it's actually a place where they can actually target vulnerable children. But if you've got that commitment, and in that culture you're saying, no matter what, we are committed from keeping children safe from harm. And that is actually, you know, you're reinforcing that when you're doing your onboard, and you're reinforcing that, you know, in posters, whenever you're advertising any events. It really shows somebody who may have that propensity, whether they're in the organisation, that there's some champions here that are not going to let it slide. If they see something, they're going to report it on. And that's what you really want to do. There's certain different preventative measures that you want to actually put in place, as opposed to just relying or coming complacent by saying, oh, that person's got to work with children's check, so they're safe. Because that's not the case.
For some children. Alrighty, so if no one's got any other questions, thank you all for attending tonight. It's not always easy, but I like these quick, short spurts of information out to the clubs. We're all time poor, so yeah, this is probably the best way for us to do it. If you've got any questions, and this includes you, Kalgoorlie, you can always reach out and ring me at the Shire, or email clubs@esperance.wa.gov.au. And yeah, I'll happily help out wherever I can in any situation. Alrighty. Okay, thanks guys.